The man came down out of the canyon in early October, dry wind in his coat and dust in his eyes. He rode a paint gelding with a limp in its left hind, and he carried no saddlebag, no bedroll, nothing but a rifle, scabbed in dried blood, and a wide-brim hat that shaded a face too lean for comfort. Folks at the Twin Forks post office would later say he looked like someone who hadn't spoken in months, maybe years. They were mostly right. He didn't stop in town, just watered his horse at the trough, nodded once to the blacksmith, who was too startled to wave, then rode east into the hills, where the land cracked open into gulches and juniper. Out there in that scoured stretch of nowhere was the Flint Ranch, though calling it a ranch was a courtesy. The outbuildings were half collapsed, the fencing gone to rust and briars, and the cattle had scattered months ago. Only the main house still stood, and even that tilted on a crumbling foundation like it was ashamed to be left. Inside lived a girl. Her name was Mara Flint, 17, thin from hunger and long work face marked with the healing traces of fists. Her right eye still closed in the mornings, from where her stepfather had struck her with a fence post. He died 2 weeks back, thrown from a borrowed horse while drunk, his skull split on a creek rock, and she hadn't buried him so much as dragged him into the root cellar and let the cold handle the rest. The ground was too hard to dig. She stopped praying by then anyway. She saw the cowboy before he saw her. She watched him from the high room through a slat in the window shutter, heart crawling up into her throat. She didn't know what kind. He was: a drifter, a looter, a scout for rustlers, but he didn't circle the house or call out. Just dismounted slow, checked the rotted porch steps, and sat on the lowest one with his back to the door, like he'd come to rest, not to take. Mara waited half an hour before she opened the door. She had her stepfather's revolver behind her back. It hadn't been fired in years, and she wasn't sure the bullets would work, but she'd shoot if she had to. He didn't turn. "You lost?" she asked. He shook his head. "Then where are you on my land?" He looked over his shoulder, eyes gray like tin under smoke. "Water," he said. She nodded once, though her grip didn't loosen. "Well, you've had it." "I can work," he said. "You lame." He didn't answer. She stepped out. Her boots made no sound on the warped floorboards. Her dress was torn at the shoulder and crusted with dried yolk, where an egg had burst against her chest days back. She looked like someone who'd survived on pride alone. "I don't need help," she said. "You're lying." That almost made her laugh. She hadn't heard anyone call her on that in years. He stood slow, not threatening, like a tree rising with the wind. Up close, he smelled like old leather and blood that had dried too long ago to still be dangerous. He looked 30, maybe 35, with skin tanned dark and eyes that didn't blink often enough. He had the kind of quiet that came from long places. "What do I call you?" she asked. He paused. "Don't need to," he said. "You dumb." "No," she narrowed her eyes. "Then you can speak." He nodded. She held the revolver up, not quite aiming, but showing it. "Come inside," she said, or "ride on. But if you stay out here much longer, coyotes will think you're meat." He followed her in. That winter came early. Snow crept in before the oaks turned yellow, and by November the road to town was impassable. The cowboy made no move to leave. He cleared the chimney, mended the barn roof, shot a buck, and cured the meat without asking for a thing. He didn't touch her, didn't talk unless spoken to, and slept in the woodshed on a straw bed he made himself. Mara watched him. She didn't trust silence. Silence had always meant danger in her house. It meant a man was drunk or brooding or choosing which bone to break next. But the cowboy's quiet was different. It didn't wait for anything. It just was. One morning she brought him coffee. He took it without speaking, but his eyes flicked up like he wasn't used to being served. "You got a name?" she asked again. He sipped as he was. She looked him over. He was sharpening his knife against a wet stone, slow rhythmic strokes. "You were in a war." He nodded once. "Which one?" He looked past her, through the open door where snow was starting to fall in thin, lazy spirals. "The one nobody talks about." That shut her up. They didn't speak again for 3 days. But she noticed he started chopping more wood than needed, lined it neat by the house so she wouldn't have to walk through drifts. When the roof started to sag with snow, he climbed it without being asked. When the wind screamed like wolves down the hills, he sat up late by the door gun, across his lap, just watching. One night she brought him stew. It was thin rabbit meat and onion, but warm. She set it on the floor beside his cot and turned to leave, but he caught her wrist, not hard, just enough to stop her. "You safe now?" he said. It took her a moment to understand. She pulled away. "I was never safe," she said, "but I'm still here." He nodded like that was the right answer. The days shortened, the nights pressed in. Mara stopped checking the horizon for signs of him leaving. She stopped pretending she didn't feel easier with his shadow near the door. The silence between them stopped being sharp. It settled like a blanket pulled over cold shoulders. But trouble doesn't vanish in winter, it burrows. 3 men came up from town in late December. They had heard the Flints were dead and came to pick the bones. They found a girl instead, and a man who didn't smile. When they tried the door, Sellers opened it. Cold night, the first one said, a grin all teeth and no kindness. Heard this place was empty. Not anymore, Sellers said. The second man shifted his coat, showing the handle of a pistol. We ain't looking for fight. You found one. The third man spat into the snow. Ain't worth it, he muttered. Come spring, she'll be starved anyhow. They left, but not without promises. Men like that don't like being refused. Mara closed the door behind them. Sellers didn't move. They'll come back, she said. He nodded. I ain't running. Didn't figure you would. She looked at him, then really looked. You came down out of nowhere, she said. Why? Sellers tilted his head. Sometimes, he said, there's someone left worth standing for. She didn't answer. Just stood in the doorway while the snow came down like ash and the wind howled against the mountains, and the quiet between them stopped being empty. It began to feel like waiting, like something was coming, like winter was only the first test. By January, the girl had learned the rhythm of his steps in the snow. Sellers didn't walk like other men. He moved like someone who didn't want to leave prints even when there was no one left to track him. He'd rise before dawn and be gone from the house for hours, returning with game, or branches for the fire, or nothing at all. She never asked what he did in the woods. Something in the way he stepped around her questions told her those silences had teeth. She stayed busy, cleaned out the cellar-built shelves for the root vegetables she managed to save, learned to skin a rabbit without making a mess of the pelt. When she bled in the snow one morning, too much too sudden, he didn't ask what was wrong. Just lit the stove, left her the bed, and took the cold floor beside it without complaint. That was how he spoke when he did not, with words, with actions, with waiting. Some nights she'd wake to the sound of him talking in sleep, always soft, like he was trying not to be heard. Sometimes he whispered names, sometimes numbers. Once she heard him cry out, not loud, but sharp, like a man flayed in a dream. When morning came, his face gave nothing, but his hands were shaking when he took his coffee. She didn't mention it. They had an understanding about things left buried. But the wolves came next, first just howls. Then a lamb torn through the fence, what was left of it, and claw prints in the snow like black spiders. They started lighting fires at night, stacking dry brush and kerosene around the edge of the house. Sellers nailed boards over the windows. He didn't sleep those nights, neither did she. What were they waiting for, she asked one morning, feeding the chicken seed they were too scared to eat. Cold, he said, desperation or weakness. She met his eyes. They'll be waiting a long time then. February bit harder than the rest. The outhouse door froze shut. The pump handle broke in the cold. She started losing feeling in her fingertips, and Sellers forced her to wear his gloves. He went barehanded. She watched them split and bleed, and never once heard him complain. There was one night she wouldn't forget. He came in late, rifle slung over one shoulder, blood on his coat, not his. A man's boot, she realized, was hanging from his belt by the laces. He tossed it into the fire without a word. She didn't ask, but that night, after she thought he'd gone to sleep, he came to her room and stood in the doorway a long time. Then he said, quiet and level, "You ever think about leaving this place?" She turned to look at him, pale from the reflection of the moon on the frost-caked window. "Where would I go? Anywhere's better than hell." She sat up. "You think this is hell?" He gave a small shrug, not dismissive, resigned. She looked down at her hands, at the cracked skin and ragged nails. "I don't think hell would have let me live this long." He didn't reply, just nodded, then left. She dreamed of fire that night. Fire and wolves and the crack of bone. And in the middle of it all, Sellers standing in the snow with no face, just a hole where his features used to be. She woke shaking. The thaw came sudden and violent in March. Ice broke from the eaves in great snapping spears. The creek flooded and took the fence with it. But the worst came on a warm night when the moon rose dull and full, and Myra smelled kerosene in the dark. She was up before he was dragging the rifle from above the door. Sellers met her at the kitchen with his eyes already narrowed. Backside, he said, smoke. They came like shadows, 3, maybe 4 faces, covered torches in hand. They didn't call out, didn't ask, just threw fire and laughed when the shed went up. Sellers didn't shoot first. He waited until they crossed the fence line. Then he stepped out into the yard and dropped the first man with a shot clean through the knee. The others scattered yelling. One fired wild, hitting the porch rail beside Myra's hip. She didn't flinch. She aimed and pulled the trigger. The shot missed. She never killed anything larger than a raccoon. Salas didn't miss. When the smoke cleared and the fire burned low, two men lay dead. One crawled back to the road trailing blood. The fourth they never found. But there were drag marks and clumps of hair caught in the fence. Sellers came back inside without a word, cleaned his gun, peeled his coat off, and left it on the floor. Myra poured whiskey into tin cups. Neither of them drank it. In the morning, she buried one of the men herself. Didn't know his name, didn't care. She used the same shovel she once thought about driving into her stepfather's spine. Afterwards, she stood by the grave and looked at the hills. Spring was coming. The trees would bud. The town would hear. Someone would ride out. They always did. She found Sellers sitting on the porch mending the stock of his rifle. "You stayed," she said. He didn't look up. "You didn't have to." "No, but you did." He nodded. She stepped close enough to see the old scar along his jawline. It looked like someone had tried to slit his throat and only half finished. "What was her name?" she asked. His fingers stopped moving, "The one you couldn't save." He looked up. For the first time, she saw anger in his face, but it wasn't for her. It was for something far older. "Sylvie," he said. She waited. "She was 10, daughter of a woman I failed. Tried to make up for it. Got her killed instead." Myra sat beside him. Wind moved the dead leaves across the yard. "You think staying here makes up for it?" "No." She looked at the woodshed charred and crumpled in the grave under the cottonwood, and the mountains still streaked with snow. "But you're staying anyway." "I am." Silence again. But this time it felt like a bond, like a knot tied slow and tight. Myra leaned back against the rail, letting her bones rest. The birds were coming back. The soil would thaw. Trouble would come again. But she would not be alone when it did. By April, the land began to stir with the groan of thawed soil. The creek ran hard and fast, cutting new paths through the pasture like veins in wounded skin. The bones of winter were still visible, snow in the shaded gullies, frost in the mornings. But there was a softness in the air now, and it made everything feel fragile. Sellers built her a new chicken coop from the boards of the burned shed. He didn't ask permission, just did it like it had always been his work. Myra watched him from the porch, a half-mended quilt in her lap. She still stitched by instinct, not comfort. Her hands didn't know what rest meant yet. He didn't speak much that month, but he stayed close enough to be seen far enough to leave her space. She caught him watching her once at dawn while she washed blood from her hands after gutting a rooster that had turned on the hens. His look wasn't pity, it was something else. Recognition maybe, or respect. Town didn't send law. Word had gotten around, too many bones left broken, too many men with missing kin, and no stomach for vengeance. Flintland was haunted, they said, not by ghosts, but by something worse. A man who didn't blink when he shot, and a girl who didn't flinch when she watched. But trouble is a river. If it doesn't come from upstream, it'll rise from the ground. It arrived in the form of a wagon. Red canvas, cracked wheels, 4 horses pulling slow and steady up the old trail that hadn't seen travel since the war. A man drove it. A woman sat beside him, dark shawl over darker eyes. Mara saw them first. She was checking snares along the north fence line when the wind shifted and carried the smell of sweat and iron. She went back to the house without running. That was something Sellers had taught her: never run, never show fear. It only feeds the thing behind you. He met her at the kitchen door, rifle already in his hand. "One wagon," she said, "couple miles out." He nodded. They didn't hide, they waited. The wagon rolled in around noon, slow as a hearse. The man driving wore city clothes turned rough by dust, and the woman beside him didn't blink once. As they stopped by the gate, neither smiled. That was the first sign something was off. "You Flint's girl?" the man asked. Mara stepped forward. "Name's Mara." He tilted his head, name used to carry weight, it still does. The woman finally moved, pulled back her shawl. Her face was lined with scars, not fresh, but deep and knotted. A blade had worked her over good, and she'd survived every cut. "You know who she is," Sellers said behind Mara low. "No Breda Trask." The name meant nothing to Mara, but Sellers lowered his rifle just slightly. The man on the wagon spat. "We're looking for someone, man named Ash Murdoch. You seen him?" Sellers shook his head. Breda Trask spoke then, voice hoarse like she'd swallowed glass. "He rode with the Red Company, killed 7 in Bitter Run, burned the whole east quarter of Saltwater. You'd remember him if he passed through." "He hasn't," Mara said. The man frowned. You answer for him now. I answer for my land. They stared each other down for a while. Then Breda leaned forward. He's got a mark, she said. Snake cut in half on his neck left side. You see that you come find us? We won't, Sella said. The wagon creaked as it turned. They didn't say goodbye. Later, Mara asked, you knew her? He nodded. She was like you once, he said. Like me how alone, but louder about it. She's hunting a man. She's been hunting him longer than you've been alive. Mara looked down at her calloused palms. You think she'll find him? She'll die trying. Spring grew heavy after that. The rains came. The creek burst its banks and flooded the lower field. Mara lost 3 hens to sickness and 1 to a fox that got smart. She trapped it skinned. It hung the pelt in the barn. One morning she woke to find Sella's gone. His bed was cold. His rifle was gone too. She waited 2 days. On the 3rd, she saddled his horse. He'd left it behind and rode east, following no trail, just a feeling. She found him 2 ridges over, crouched beside a tree, with one hand on the ground like he was listening to the earth. He didn't look surprised to see her. You're not good at leaving quiet, she said. He stood. I heard something. She frowned. What kind of something? He looked at her. Something in his face had changed, hardened. They're coming. Who men I used to ride with? The way he said it made her stomach drop. You didn't tell me. I hoped they wouldn't find me. You think they'll kill you? He looked at the horizon. They'll kill you first just to get at me. She swallowed. The wind was rising. It carried the scent of fire too early for summer burns. Someone was clearing land with flame. How many, she asked. 4, maybe 6. You can take them. I can slow them. That's not what I asked. He didn't answer. They rode back in silence. She didn't ask more, just started packing. That night they made no fire. They slept in shifts. Myra kept the revolver on her hip even when she knelt to boil water. The next day, Sella started digging. What are you doing, she asked. Trenches. She stared. You planning to fight a war? It's the only thing I know how to do. She helped him. They dug till their hands bled. They buried traps in the dry creek bed, sharpened stakes, pulled up the floorboards, and hid rifles beneath. She did it all without speaking, but her silence had changed. It wasn't fear anymore. It was preparation. On the 4th day, the first shot rang out at dawn. They came on foot, clever enough not to ride in, knowing the sound would give them up. Sella's dropped one at 60 yards, clean through the collarbone. Another tripped a wire and lost half his leg. But the rest kept coming. By nightfall, 2 bodies lay in the yard, and Sella's had taken a bullet to the side, not deep, but bleeding steady. Myra dragged him inside, tore up her old dress for bandages. You should go, he said. Say that again, and I'll put another hole in you. His lips twitched, not quite a smile. She sat with him through the night. His fever broke before dawn. She fed him broth with shaking hands. He caught her wrist. I thought I was done, he said. Done fighting, done with pain. You were wrong. I usually am. They sat like that a while. And outside in the dark beyond the burned trees, the last of his past waited with matches and knives. They would come. She would mate them because Selah stayed, and so would she. They came at first light, 3 men walking, like they'd spent their lives riding, and only dismounted when death was near. No colors, no flags, no mercy in their faces, just dust on their boots and rope coiled on their belts like it wasn't enough to kill. Someone had to hang. Myra spotted them from the loft. She didn't call out. She just touched the rifle stock, leaning against the wall, counted the cartridges again, and pressed her lips together hard enough to bleed. Sella sat propped in the corner of the kitchen wound, bandage, fever gone, but strength still failing. He watched her descend the stairs like a man watching a storm touch down. You don't have to do this, he said. She checked the bolt on the door. Neither did you. He didn't argue after that. The men didn't knock. They didn't shout threats or call names. They walked straight to the edge of the yard and waited like they knew patience hurt more than bullets. Myra stepped onto the porch. She wore her mother's coat too big across the shoulders, sleeves rolled twice. She didn't shake. The tallest of them stepped forward. He had a broken nose that had healed wrong and eyes like polished stone. Where's the ghost you came for, Sellers? She said. He's not leaving. The man laughed. You think you're standing in the way? She raised the rifle. I'm standing where I choose. He tilted his head. You ain't him. You didn't burn Waco. You didn't drown that sheriff in oil. You're just a girl. No, she said. I'm the girl who watched her stepfather rot in a cellar. I'm the girl who dug her own grave and decided not to lie down in it. And I'm the one who will pull this trigger. He smiled, then not kindly. Behind him, the others moved wide, fanning out like wolves. She waited until the first one hit the fence line, then she fired. The blast echoed off the hills. The man jerked back his shoulder, blown open screams swallowed by the sound. The others surged forward. Sellers kicked the door open from behind, braced himself against the frame, and fired twice. One man fell, the other reached the porch. He grabbed Mara by the coat, dragged her off the steps. She didn't scream, didn't beg. She clawed at his face, kicked hard, twisted out of the coat, and rolled in the dirt, catching the revolver from her belt as she rose. She shot him in the throat. He died, making no sound. Afterwards, she stood in the yard, panting, blood on her cheek, coat abandoned. Her fingers were cramping from the grip of the gun. Salas hobbled out, white around the mouth. "That all of them?" he asked. She nodded. "Burn them," he said. They didn't speak again until night. The fire was low, the air stank of ash and gunpowder. Mara scrubbed her hands until the skin flaked. She sat beside Salaz on the step, the rifle across her knees like a lapdog. "They'll send more," she said. "Yes, you've done a lot of damage. Yes, you sorry." Sellers didn't answer for a long time. Then I'm not sure it matters now. You still got enemies. Not as many as I used to." She leaned back. Her hair had grown long again, she hadn't noticed. "I think I killed a man today," she said. "You did, he was bigger than me." Sellers turned to her. His face was drawn, but there was something there now. Something like pride scraped raw and honest. "You were bigger than him, where it counted." She didn't smile, just nodded once. That night a storm came through, heavy rain, wind that snapped the barn door open and howled through the gaps in the roof. They didn't sleep. In the dark, she asked, "What was Waco?" "A mistake," he said. "You start the fire." "I lit it. I didn't know who was still inside." "You run." He looked at her. "I walked." She turned her face to the window. "I'd rather ride into fire than walk away from it." "You might get your chance." He coughed once, winced, and pressed a hand to his side. She moved to help. He waved her off. "No," he said, "you did enough." She sat back down. The wind rattled the windows. "Someone taught you to fight," she said. "Someone tried. You touched me." "I already am." Spring pushed harder into May. Wildflowers burst along the ridge. Birds returned to the loft. The land started to forgive itself, but the road to town stayed empty. No one dared come, not yet. Mara mended the fences, planted beans and potatoes. She found the old ledger where her mother had once written milk tallies and seed counts. She started filling it in. Sellers got stronger. He limped more, now slept longer. But his aim was still true. And when the wolves came again, real ones, not men, he killed two and left the rest running. One afternoon, she found him sitting by the creek, boots off, feet in the water. She hadn't seen him that still in all the time he'd been there. "You look like you could almost be happy," she said. "Almost you thinking of leaving?" He looked up. "Would you let me?" She shrugged. "I've let worse men stay, and I shot the ones who didn't ask." He laughed short and bitter. "Mara," he said, and it was the first time he'd ever used her name aloud. "You don't need me. I know you want me to stay." She walked down to the water set beside him, didn't look at him when she answered. "I don't want anything. I just know what's right." He nodded slowly, and this is. She looked out over the hills where the wind moved through the grass like breath, and the smoke of old fires had finally cleared. "Yes," she said, "it is." They didn't speak after that, but something settled between them. Not peace, not forgiveness, but the first shape of something that could stand its ground. They'd earned the silence now. Summer came like a knife sheathed in velvet, soft days, but sharp beneath. The land wore green again, the chickens laid, the creek ran clear, and the blood that had soaked into the porch boards had faded to the color of rust. Not gone, never gone, just part of the place now. They didn't talk about the past. It hovered like heat on the horizon, always there, but no longer needing a name. Sela spent his mornings in the field teaching her how to move with a rifle, not against it, how to feel wind in her cheek and know the bullet's arc, how to kill without hesitation, but still keep a piece of herself intact. She listened, she learned. At night she'd read aloud from a water-damaged Bible that had belonged to her mother. She skipped the Psalms and the parables. She read the hard parts, the wrath, and the wandering, the silence in the desert. Selas listened, head bowed but eyes open. One evening after they'd set snares and chopped wood and mended the west fence again, Mara asked a question that had been lodged in her like a thorn. What happens if no one comes anymore? Selas didn't answer right away. He was carving a handle for a broken knife, the blade cleaned and sharpened from the fire-blackened wreck of the old shed. Someone always comes, he said. It's just a matter of when. But what if they do, she asked. What if it's just us now? What if the world forgets? He looked up at her, not soft, not cruel, just steady. Then we stay ready anyway. She nodded because that was the only answer she trusted. August cracked the sky open, heat like breath from a furnace. Coyotes prowled near the fence at night, hungry enough to risk bullets. One morning, Salaz found a new set of prints near the North Trail boots, fresh too deep for a traveler passing through. He didn't say anything, just started oiling his gun again. Mara noticed they watching us. He nodded. How many, hard to say, but they're patient. So they waited again. It was a kind of rhythm now. Tension, blood, silence, then the waiting. She didn't flinch anymore. That part of her had burned off like old bark. All that was left was bone and fire. It happened on a Tuesday, a sky clear enough to mistake for peace. Mara was boiling lye for soap when the first shot cracked through the kitchen window, burying itself in the cupboard door behind her. She dropped to the floor, already rolling, caught the rifle under the table. Heard sailors shouting from outside, heard return fire glass. Shattered chickens screamed. She kicked open the back door and moved low along the fence just as he taught her. 3 men, 2 behind the cart wreck near the old well, 1 circling wide through the tall grass. Sellers was already bleeding when she reached him, shoulder again, same side, same damn place. He had his back to the barn, gun drawn but sighting poorly. "You always get shot here," she muttered, grabbing his belt and dragging him toward the trough, like it's tradition. He coughed. "You complain too much." She kissed his cheek dry, hot blood slick. "Shut up and cover me." Then she moved low and fast like water under a door. She looped around through the hayfield, catching the one flanker in profile. He never saw her. She shot him in the gut clean and fast, then took his rifle and used it to pin down the others. Silaz moved slow, but sure, bleeding bad, but killing one clean through the skull. The last man, he ran. Myra didn't chase. She just stood over the bodies and breathed through her teeth until the shaking stopped. Then she turned back. Sellers was sitting against the barn, pale, breathing shallow. She knelt. "Stay with me," she said. His eyes found hers. "I'm tired," he said. "I know, you got a shovel still," she choked on a laugh. "I'm not burying you. You might have to. I'm not." Silence. Then slowly he reached out, touched her cheek with fingers, sticky with blood and dirt and years of regret. "You did more than survive," he said. She held his hand. "So did you." He didn't die, not that day. She kept him breathing, stitched him shut, fed him broth, again sat beside him through 3 days of fever and the muttering of half-remembered names. When he woke for real, the first thing he saw was her face. "You stayed," he said. "You knew I would. That fall they rebuilt. She sold pelts in town." Folks didn't ask questions anymore, just handed over coins and looked away. He started limping, Les started talking more. She wrote letters sometimes. To no one, just words on paper, things she'd never said out loud. "I am not dead," she wrote once, "and neither is he." The land healed slow. The house stayed ugly, patched and scorched and full of scar, but it was theirs. One day in October, she came back from checking the traps and found him on the porch with a second chair built beside his. A little crooked, rough-hewn, but solid. She sat in it. They didn't speak. They just watched the sun set over the valley where no one dared ride anymore. Not because of fear, but because the girl who lived there had become something else. Not prey, not a child, not a widow of fate, but a warning. And the man beside her, he had stayed. Through fire, through winter, through the price of old sins, he had stayed. And now they watched the quiet together.